Hello everybody and welcome back to Galaxy Server Administration. My name is Simon Gladman and I'm a bioinformatician at the University of Melbourne in Australia, and I'm also one of the administrators of Galaxy Australia, a large public Galaxy server. In this session, we'll be talking about upgrading Galaxy to the latest version, or how you can keep your Galaxy server up to date. Okay, firstly, I'd like everyone to go to the Galaxy training website, which is at training.galaxyproject.org. And the tutorial we're going to follow today is located under Galaxy Server Administration down here. And then if we scroll down under Further Learning, you'll see Upgrading Galaxy here. And so this is the hands-on tutorial we're going to follow today. Okay, quick overview of this particular tutorial. The questions we're going to answer, hopefully, is how I can find what current version of Galaxy I'm running on my current Galaxy server. How do I upgrade the Galaxy server to the latest version? And some of the objectives of the tutorial, so that at the end of it, you should be able to understand how to find the server of the Galaxy that you're running at the moment, how to find the latest release version, how to back up the Galaxy server database, why that's a good idea to do on a regular basis, and then how to upgrade the Galaxy server to a new version. The requirements or the prerequisites for this tutorial, you need to have a Galaxy server running on a virtual machine somewhere or on a computer somewhere. Hopefully you've done it by using Ansible. And in fact, we're going to be modifying the Ansible to perform the upgrade. And so this is a really good idea to have done it this way. So hopefully you've completed the Ansible tutorial and the Galaxy installation with Ansible tutorial. And you may have done many others. But that's okay, because this one is compatible. We can do it at the beginning or at the end, or however you like. It'll take about an hour to do this tutorial. There aren't any overview slides, unfortunately, for this one. Okay. So let's begin. So just a bit of an overview. If you're going to become the administrator of a Galaxy server, one of the most important tasks that you have is to keep your Galaxy server running for your users, and also to keep it secure so that no one can hack in and steal their data, or, you know, screw around with things, you know, make things, break things, whatever. And so part of your job is to keep the server up to date with security patches, minor fixes, and also perform major version upgrades. Luckily for us, if we've been using Ansible as our installation method for Galaxy, like we have in the rest of the tutorials so far this week, then this process is actually pretty easy. We can get all the latest patches and fixes for our currently installed version of Galaxy pretty much just by rerunning the Ansible playbook on a regular basis. In fact, on my Galaxy server, which is Galaxy Australia, we run the playbook roughly every week, and that will pull in all the latest upgrades to our particular version of Galaxy and all security fixes, etc., and apply them to our Galaxy server. We can also upgrade our Galaxy version by modifying the version number in our Ansible var files and rerunning the playbook, and that will automatically upgrade Galaxy to the latest version for us. It's that simple. So we're going to go through that process in this tutorial, and we'll talk about some other things around the upgrade process and some of the things you need to think about. Okay, before we move on though, I'd like to just quickly talk about some notes on Galaxy versioning and the release process for Galaxy. As at 2021 June, which is when I'm recording this, Galaxy has 3 new version releases per year in each of January, May, and September, and then named or denominated by the year and the month. i.e. January 2021's Galaxy release is version number 21.01. So the year 21 and the month 01. So May's release is 2105 and September's will be 2109. Official Galaxy release versions are tagged on the Galaxy project's GitHub releases page, and they're tagged with V yy.mm, so version 2101. And each version also has an official branch in the GitHub repository, release_year, which is release_2101 for January's release. Galaxy versions will be supported with security fixes, bug patches, and other improvements for 1 year from the time of their release. So, for example, the January 21 release, which is release 2101, it will be supported all the way through until the end of January 2022, which means that any patches or security fixes or anything will be backported to that release for 1 year. Okay. So the agenda for this tutorial, we're going to run through how to find what your current version is. We're going to run through how to find the latest release version. We'll talk about the release notes that Galaxy comes with, quite extensive release notes, and why they're important to go through. We'll talk about how to back up the Galaxy database and why that's important. And then we'll upgrade our Galaxy servers to a new version. And then we'll talk about ongoing maintenance. Some assumptions. This tutorial assumes you have a VM or a machine where you have Galaxy installed, and that you installed your Galaxy using some Ansible scripts. And hopefully you used ones very similar to the ones in our tutorial, or in fact, you completed the tutorial and you're still going, and we have all of those Ansible scripts available to us. And that you have command line and sudo access to your VM or computer where it's installed, because we're going to need to be doing a Galaxy database dump, and we'll need command line access to do that. Just a little bit of information about the Galaxy server version installed by the tutorials. This tutorial was written in June of 2021, and so at the time the latest version was 2101. But in the tutorials for the rest of this week, or the rest of the time that we've been talking about them, we've been installing version 20.09, but the latest version at the time of writing was 2101. And so what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade our Galaxies from 20.09 to 2101. If yours are different, that doesn't really matter. If you're already at 2109 and you're upgrading to 2201, the same process applies, just change the numbers. The first thing we need to talk about is how to find what your current Galaxy server version is. Luckily, it's on the admin page. So if you go to your Galaxy server, like I have here, here is my Galaxy server that I've been using all week as part of this training. Mine, it happens to be this, yours will be different. I can find out what the current Galaxy server version is by clicking on this admin page here. I'll do that. And it says here, Galaxy version 20.09, which means this is a September 2020 release of Galaxy. Okay, so that's the current version that I'm running. Very simple way to find out. It can also be done programmatically. So via a command line or a web browser, I can point a web browser to this particular URL where I've got here your Galaxy. If you type in the actual Galaxy server URL and then append it with /API/version, so you're accessing the API of your Galaxy server and asking for the version, it will be returned to you. So if I go to here, instead of saying admin after it, I can just put API/version. It appears here, and you can see it's here, version major 20.09. Pretty cool. Another way I can find the version of my Galaxy server is by accessing the API from the command line using curl. And so I can go to my terminal, I can type this particular command in with my actual URL for my Galaxy server, and then append it with API version, and it will put that on there. So I can go curl https gat-8.oz.training.galaxyproject.eu/API/version. and then it will return that in JSON. So you can see here my version is 20.09. Okay. Okay, so that's two different ways we can find out what version that we have on our Galaxy server currently. Now what we want to do is find out what the latest version of Galaxy is. So how do we find the latest release version of Galaxy? Well, there's a number of ways we can do that. Galaxy is released 3 times per year. So if it kind of in January, February kind of range, or April or May, or you know, nearly June, or September, October, then there may be a new release about to be announced. And so keep your ear out for the Galaxy newsletter, or visit the galaxyproject.org homepage, because I will put announcements about new versions in those things. But probably the easiest way of finding the version number, the latest release, is via the extensive Galaxy documentation website, which is located at docs.galaxyproject.org. And if we click on that, open it in a new documentation thing, you can see here, well, at the time when I wrote the tutorial, the latest release was January 2021, which is version 21.01. But now there's been a May release, and so the latest version is 21.05. Okay, so that's probably the easiest way to find out what the latest release version is, by going to docs.galaxyproject.org. Now, this doc site is really extensive, talks about everything you need to know about Galaxy. Okay, so the question here is, what was the current latest version? It's not 2101 anymore, it's now 2105. Okay, now I just want to take a bit of an aside and talk about the importance of release notes. So each time a new Galaxy server version is released, it comes with extensive release notes in 2 different flavors. There's the full release notes, which is designed for administrators and people connected with the Galaxy project, so you can understand what's changed in the Galaxy code base, what effect it may have on your installation, and how also it may affect your users. And then there's also user-facing release notes, which provide kind of a visual and interactive summary and some release highlights of things that are in this particular version. And I highly recommend that before upgrading your Galaxy server to the latest version, or even any newer version for that matter, it's highly recommended that you read the release notes. They're very extensive, and they contain a lot of important information about any new features, new links, and then how to configure those particular new features on your server, or at least links to bits of documentation that will help you. And so the full release notes look something like this. This is the release notes for 2101. So what I'm going to do is I'll just take you back to the Galaxy documentation site, and we'll actually have a look at what the May 2105 release notes look like. So if we click on this link here, it takes us to the user release notes. And if you scroll down, you can see here, it's saying that there's a Spanish language version of Galaxy has finally been produced, some bug fixes and stabilities, some things about reports, and then some new visualizations, new data types. It talks about built-in tool updates, who did the release. But then there's a link down here that says full release notes. And so for administrators, it's probably a good idea to have a look at the full release notes rather than just the user-facing ones. So if we click on the full release notes, it will take us to them. Okay, and obviously one of the things in the 2105, the May 2021 release, highlights that administrators need to think about job handling and background tasks and development stacks, upcoming deprecation notices, configuration changes are all in here. And then all the enhancements that are made and all the pull requests that made those enhancements. And as we continue to scroll down, there are a lot of changes, all the fixes that were made, all the bug fixes that were made since the last major release, and all the pull requests that were merged to make those particular changes. And so these release notes are really, really extensive. Right, and so it's a really good idea, at least to skim over the list of enhancements and the list of fixes, so that you have a bit more of an understanding of what might have changed in this particular release of Galaxy before you do an upgrade. Okay, it's enough talking about what version we're on and what the newest version is. Now we want to actually do the upgrade, but one of the really important things we need to do first is back up the Galaxy database in case something goes wrong while we're doing an upgrade. So as you probably know, at the heart of every Galaxy server is its database, and it's the most important part of the Galaxy server, in my opinion. It contains all of the metadata required for the server to operate. So all the records of all the users, all the jobs, all the data sets, everything since the server was started. And sometimes when we upgrade Galaxy with a new version, it makes changes to the database schema. And so when we do the upgrade, we'll actually need to modify the database. And whenever we're doing any kind of modification to the database, it's a really good idea to back the database up first in case something goes wrong, like there's a power outage halfway through, or disk crashes, or the database server itself gives up the ghost, or whatever it happens to be, and we end up losing or corrupting the database. That would be terrible and be an absolute tragedy. So we need to make sure we've got a backup of our database. In fact, in a production environment, it's a really good idea to make more regular backups of the database. In any case, on my Galaxy server, I perform a nightly backup of our database, and I also have an offsite copy of my database that's updated continuously. It's kind of like a remote copy of the database, I guess. But it's like a replicate database server, and we do this just in case, because we've had experiences in the past where, you know, for me it was 6 or 7 years ago where I almost lost the Galaxy database. Luckily, I had a backup, but it has happened, and I'm sure the other Use Galaxy.star administrators will tell you similar stories. Okay, so now we're going to do some hands-on stuff, and we're going to back up the database, and we're going to use pgdump to do this. So the way we're going to do it is we need to log into our Galaxy server. So hopefully you've been assigned one for this week. My one is at this particular FQDN. Hopefully yours will be at a different one, and you have one. So the best way to do it is to SSH into it. So I'm just going to do that. Put my password in. All right, I'm logged in. So what I need to do is I need to dump the database out to a file somehow. And the best way to do that is to actually be the Galaxy user, because the Galaxy user has access rights to the database. In this case, the database is running on the same computer as our Galaxy server. And so I just need to turn myself into the Galaxy user and then perform the database dump. In other cases, and especially for large Galaxy servers, the database may be running on a completely different VM. And so you'll need to figure out how to get access to it from the command line. Probably from that same machine. But what I'm going to do here is the same process, no matter which machine you're logging into. Okay, so I'm going to change my user to the Galaxy user, and I'm going to do that by using the sudo command, sudo su-l Galaxy. So now I'm the Galaxy user, and I know that I can get access to the Galaxy database by typing PSQL, and yes, I can get access to it. And to get out of it, I do /q to quit. All right, so now what I want to do is dump the Galaxy database out to a file. Now, pgdump is the utility that we're going to use. It's a Postgres utility. If you're using MySQL as your backend database, or using SQLite as your backend for your database, which we don't recommend, if you're using a different database, the command will be different. And It's outside the scope of this tutorial. I'm sure you can look it up online. But the thing we want to do is pg dump galaxy, and this will just dump out the entire galaxy database as raw SQL to the terminal. So we don't want to do that. We want to redirect it somewhere, and we're going to redirect it via gzip to zip it up, because on my Galaxy server database, even when it's zipped, is around about 10 gigabytes or so, and others are larger or could be smaller, but it's a good idea to pipe it through gzip. So I'm going to do pg_dump. I'm going to dump the Galaxy database. I'm going to pipe it to gzip, and then I'm going to redirect all of that output to Galaxy_database and some kind of good name. I don't know, 2009 backup number 1.sql.gz or something. But make up a good name for this file that you understand, and you'll be able to remember what the hell it is. So I perform this. That was really fast because this is a very small database on a test Galaxy server. In reality, this could take 45 minutes to perform this backup, and you can replace gzip with other zippers. I use pgz because it's multi-threaded and can perform really fast zips. So I use pgz in place of it, but all that kind of thing. Now, if I have a look in my home directory for Galaxy now, you can see that we have a backup of our Galaxy database. And if I do ls-lah, you can see that it's 116 kilobases. Sorry, thinking about genomics. It's 116 kilobytes in size. So it's very small. Like I said before, mine's in tens of gigabytes. I'm sure Nate's is bigger, and Galaxy Europe or Jim Morrow's Beyond server is even bigger again. So yes, databases can get very large. And so you need to think about where you're going to put the backups, how often you're going to do it, all those kind of things. But it's one thing I will stress though, is it's very important to do a database backup before you attempt an upgrade. All right, so we finished our upgrade. Fantastic, that's really good. Now what we need to do is upgrade Galaxy to a new version. Right, so first thing I'm going to do is exit out of the Galaxy user back to the Ubuntu user, and read on in the tutorial. Okay, so hopefully you've been following best practices and you've been using Ansible to install and configure your Galaxy server. And if you have been, then you're in luck. This is going to be really simple. If you haven't been, if you haven't been using Ansible, then there's some documentation on how to perform an upgrade at this URL here, galaxyproject.org/admin/maintenance. If you go to that, it will tell you all the different steps you need to go through to do an upgrade. It's basically things like delete all the PYC files, force an update of the virtual environment, rebuild the client, upgrade, do a git pull, manage the database upgrade, manage the Galaxy upgrade, etc., etc. And so there's a whole bunch of different steps you need to follow, and they're all outlined in this Galaxy Project admin maintenance URL here. However, if we have been using Ansible as our method for installation and maintaining our Galaxy server, then this becomes really simple. All we need to do is change the version that we're using in our Ansible and then run the playbook. Okay. However, before we do any of this, there's a few things we need to think about, especially if you're running a large production server and you've got lots of users, or even if you're running a small one and you've only got a few users. You have to understand that Galaxy is going to be restarted. Okay, so once we do the upgrade, after the upgrade's been finished, Galaxy is going to restart. And is this an appropriate time for this to happen? You have to think about how many users you've got online at the moment and what they're doing. And does it need to be scheduled with your users? Do you need to say to your users, hey, the Galaxy server is going to restart now because I'm going to upgrade it, and maybe allow for an hour or an hour and a half for it to be down, especially if you're doing a database dump. And understand the database schema may change and you need to have backed up your database. Can't stress that enough. But once you've done all that, it's time to actually do the update. So if we're using Ansible, it's really simple. We go to our group vars Galaxy servers file and we change the Galaxy commit ID from release 20.09 to release 2101 or whatever the latest one is. In this case, I'm just going to do 2101. I'm not going to go to the newest one, 2105 just yet. We'll just do 2101. Okay, so that's all we need to do. So let's go and do it. So all of my Ansible stuff is in this Galaxy folder on my virtual machine. So I'm going to go cd Galaxy. And you can see here, I've got my files, I've got group vars, roles and templates, etc. All the things that you probably would have created during this admin course. And I'm going to be editing a file inside group vars, which is called galaxyservers.yaml. I'm going to use Vim for that because I like it. You can use whatever you like. All right, so this is my galaxyservers.yaml file. And what we need to find is this Galaxy commit ID. And you can see here under the Galaxy heading, there's Galaxy commit ID, and it currently says release 20.09, and I'm going to change this to 21.01. Okay, that's all I have to change. I'm going to save it and quit. Now, just to reiterate, before I do anything else, I'm going to go back to my Galaxy server. Here's my Galaxy server here. I'm going to click on the admin tab. And you can see we're running Galaxy version 20.09. And now I'm going to perform the upgrade. And the tutorial says to do that, I just do Ansible playbook, galaxy.yaml, and I run our Galaxy playbook. Okay. So as it goes through, it'll go through all the initial bits. See here it says update Galaxy to a specified reference, and it's changed. Okay, so it's going to do that now. And so it knows it needs to update Galaxy. So it's installing base dependencies. So it's installing all new versions of all the dependencies for Galaxy. So this could take some time. And just a note on why we're using Ansible to do this. So some of the things that Ansible needs to do this update is it needs to rebuild the client, needs to update the database, it's done a git pull, it's done a whole bunch of other things, it needs to rebuild the virtual environment and then restart. And if you weren't using Ansible to do all these things, you need to do all of this stuff manually yourself. And it can be quite complicated and involved. And if you get any of that process wrong or in the wrong order, then your upgrade won't work. And your Galaxy server will be out of action until you fix it. But if you're using the Ansible, it does it all for you, and it's actually quite nice. Okay, you'll notice here that it's realized that the client version has changed, and so that it needs to rebuild the client. And so this can take a while because it needs to compile the JavaScript into the new client. This could take some time. So don't be afraid if this takes 15 minutes for it to happen. It'll take 15 minutes. And this will probably be a good time to go make yourself a cup of tea and yeah, sit down, wait for it to finish. Now, part of the complexity that the Ansible is obscuring for us is that there are a number of different ways to build the client. You can build the client for a development environment, or build the client for a production environment, or build the client for other things. And depending on which version of the client you decide to build, you could have a very large client JavaScript interface or a very small one. And so by default, the Ansible will build the production client, which is quite small and loads very quickly. But if you do it manually and you don't specify which version you want, by default, I think it gets the development one, which is quite large and can take quite some time to load, in the order of, you can add 5 or 6 seconds to your page load times, which if you're running a production Galaxy server is probably not the best thing. So yeah, once again, using Ansible is a great idea. Admittedly, it obfuscates a lot of things, but it does make things a lot easier for you also. Okay, our client build is finished. And we've got all the way down to the point where Galaxy is restarting. And now it's just finishing off the playbook. All right, and we're done. A quick check to make sure everything's going okay is to look at the Galaxy logs. We do that by doing journal CTL minus FU Galaxy. We can see here that the handlers are up and running, and when we see this app is not a web app, we can generally say that the Galaxy is up and running. So we go back to here, we can click reload. There's Galaxy, and now to find out, once again, to find out what version we're currently running, we can either click on the admin interface, which we'll do, and you can see here now we're running Galaxy version 21.01. Okay, that's pretty cool. Or we can do it by the API the way we did it before. Now this is pretty cool. We've just taken Galaxy from 20.05 to 21.01, which has a whole bunch of different things, like a new, compared to 20.09, has a different history panel, which looks completely different. I reckon it looks pretty cool myself. So, you know, it's pretty good here. It has it's moved the upload data button around. It's done a whole bunch of different things. And by going to 21.05, which you can do just by changing that release 21.01 to release 21.05 and rerunning the playbook again, you may even get more changes. Okay. So that was pretty simple, yeah? So that's another reason, yet another reason to use Ansible. Okay. Now I'll talk a little bit about ongoing maintenance of your Galaxy server. The Galaxy community is continually supporting the release versions of Galaxy, and they'll do that for 1 year. They regularly update the releases with all sorts of bug fixes and patches and security enhancements. And us as administrators, it's important for us to keep our Galaxy servers up to date, to protect our users and our data and our servers and our hardware, etc., and our networks. And so the easiest way to do this is just to regularly rerun the playbook, and that will do a git pull and include any little enhancements that have been done, any bug fixes, any slight patches will be included, and they'll be done for a year. Okay, another really good thing is the regular running of the playbook also encourages you and your team members to make changes to the Ansible scripts and not the live system. If you start going in here and into your Galaxy server and editing directly your job conf file or any of your galaxy.yaml files, and you save a change there and restart Galaxy manually, and then somebody else comes along and changes your Ansible scripts and runs a playbook, any changes you made to the live version will be overwritten by the Ansible. And so it's a really good idea for you and your team to get into the habit of making changes to the Ansible, not to the live system. And it also protects you a little bit, because by making changes to the Ansible and hopefully keeping that Ansible in a Git repository somewhere, then you've got a record of all the changes that you made. And also, if something goes wrong, you can just roll back to an earlier commit and rerun the playbook, and your Galaxy server is back up and running again. So yeah, ongoing maintenance, running the playbooks regularly is important. Okay, in conclusion, using Ansible to keep your server up to date is probably the best practice method. Always back up your database before you do anything to your Galaxy server. In fact, think seriously about doing regular backups of your database, and rerun the playbook from time to time to keep your Galaxy server up to date. And I hope you got something out of this tutorial and out of this tutorial series. Thank you and goodbye.